Sermon, as you see in the notes, is Strangers and Pilgrims, and it's kind of a bit of an oxymoron. How can you be a chosen people and be strangers and pilgrims at the same time? And that's kind of the world in which we live. We are called by God. We feel we're called by God. God has selected us. We have a relationship with God. And yet the Bible shows us that we're strangers and pilgrims at the same time. Now, I believe it has a sense of importance and an application for 2012 and for us today is because we live in a world that is so filled with chaos, and even in our own country, that people trying to belong, and in this political year that we have, people belonging to different groups, organizations, different ways of looking at things politically, and we find ourselves so polarized in so many ways. And as being polarized, being a stranger and a pilgrim. I don't believe that's the case of what we're talking about here. But I want to go through 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, and hopefully help us to realize what this is all about, what Peter is talking about, and have a greater appreciation for what the calling that God has given to each and every one of us. So Peter starts us off here in 1 Peter chapter 2, and he reminds Christians of the reality of their lives, that they indeed are strangers and pilgrims. Now, I want to emphasize this. Being a stranger and a pilgrim you don't need to necessarily be strange. There's a difference between being strange and being a stranger and a pilgrim. When I was looking in the NIV, it uses strangers and aliens. Now, when we tend to think of aliens, we tend to think of little green people coming from Mars or from outer space somewhere. And we always look at aliens. This is a funny thing about us. We look at aliens as being smarter than us. Has anybody ever looked like, well, these aliens came to invade our Earth and they were a lot dumber? We always look at them as being more advanced. Well, we're called strangers and we're called aliens. As we go through this chapter, we see what Peter is telling us. A stranger is, as we well know, is someone that is unknown to you. It doesn't mean that they're strange, but they're unknown to you. It is interesting that as we walk through our life, our Christian life, that we oftentimes appear to be strange to people. People wonder, well, what in the world's going on? And of course we've had, and it has been the talk of the whole week of the football world, of Tim Tebow and his belief and how all of that has come about and what he is doing. And in fact, they're predicting that the game tonight is going to be more watched than any football game that the whole year. Because he's playing, and of course they had some things about, his passing per pass is 31.6, which is John 3:16, and all those things. But I just find it interesting. It seems strange to a lot of people that a person would worship God, and that would be the primary thing in their life. And this is one of the things we're going to look at. A pilgrim, that's a resident foreigner. And what I want to, and I'm kind of going to give you a little heads up what I'm trying to help us to understand, that as being strangers and pilgrims, what we have to realize, what is first and foremost in our life? Where does our citizenship really lie? Because if we're not careful, we think that our citizenship fully, completely, and forever is in America. Or I'm a Californian. Or I am an Israelite. Or I'm a Jew, or I'm this, or I am that. That really is our identity and who we are. Or I am of this race, or I am of this culture. And I would suggest that what we find here in the book of Peter, it says it a little differently, it presents it a little differently. Now, all this would be strange without God's definition. and his part in this life. God gives it definition, I think, that'll help us to understand and appreciate it as well. And by God's definition, I want to take a look at what the book of Hebrews tells us in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 8. The author of the book of Hebrews tells us about being strangers and pilgrims, and we find here in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8, it says, by faith, when he was called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, he obeyed, he went, even though he did not know where he was going. And there's a lot of, obviously, parallels that we're talking about. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob's, who were heirs with him of the same promise, for he was looking forward to a city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. This is what Abraham was looking for. And he considered himself a foreigner, a stranger in a different land. Again, we can become so attached to our country, we can become so attached to our county and or a city or an organization that we fail to keep this as a primary factor in our life. Then going on later in Hebrews 11, verse 13, he says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. The people who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. So again, now we're seeing this. This is not a new thought, a new concept. We go all the way back to Abraham as a man who was a stranger and a pilgrim, looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. Now Jesus makes this statement as well in John chapter 16. So we have the example of Abraham, but we also have Jesus making this statement. In John chapter 18 and verse 36 and verse 37, Jesus says this. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews, but now my kingdom is from another place. And then they asked him, are you a king then? Said Pilate. Jesus answered, you were right in saying, I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born. And for this I came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. So we find Jesus' own statement here that his kingdom is not of this world. Now, how are we to live? Well, Jesus gives us also another example of this in terms of being his disciples in John 17. John 17 and verse 13, where he tells his disciples here in his prayer, as he's praying to the Father, he says, I am coming to you now, but I say these things while I am still in the world, so that they may have the full measure of my joy within them. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them. Now again, we're looking at the kingdom, and Jesus is saying, you, disciples of his, that the world in which we live, the country in which we live, there's a good chance that you're going to be hated. For they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. Now, that's kind of strange thinking in some ways, but is it really? He says, my prayer is not that you would take them out of the world, but you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. And as you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. So we find that even though we're not of the world, Jesus says that we are to be sent back into the world, but not participate in it.
Feeling the blues today, or tired of life already? Do you have questions about life, or need spiritual advice? We can help. Log on to worldwidechurchofgod.com or wcgfairfield.blogspot.com and stay connected to reality.
The
Worldwide Church of God in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto are located in the San Francisco Bay Area, regarded as the most prosperous region in the United States. We believe Jesus Christ when he proclaimed in Matthew 6:24 that serving God is more important than serving mammon. We welcome everyone to come and worship and fellowship every Saturday at the times listed on your screen and on our website, worldwidechurchofgod.com.